Hello, I'm John Grom, and welcome to our 150th Right and Left Discussion Forum. We hold our televised discussions twice monthly to demonstrate the value of civil, productive, open-minded political dialogue. Today, our panel will depart from our normal process of addressing a particular topic. Instead, we'll take a few moments to talk about ourselves by sharing a few details of our backgrounds. This is our 150th program, and if you're one of our regular viewers, you have by now learned that you've learned of the political orientation of each of our panelists. We thought you might be interested in learning a little bit more about their backgrounds that may explain their various political opinions. Today's panel, beginning on my left, is Bryan Laubaugh, President of R&B Financial Services. On his left is Joe Gaines, member of the faculty of the University of Akron. On his left is Patty Haskins, member of the Wadsworth City Council. And on her left is Dr. Ronald Chamberlin, retired senior research chemist. Bryan, you get to go first. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, not sure how far you want to go back, but I think my formative years, my father was in the military. He was in the Army. We traveled a lot between kindergarten and 7th grade. Lived overseas, lived in several different states. He was born and raised in Akron, and I guess that's where our roots are. My mom was raised out in Randolph, which is in Suffield, just out past Kent. My mom is a Republican. My dad was a Democrat. So that always led to some interesting discussions. We have 3 younger brothers and an older sister. We were raised with a very clear understanding of what was right and what was wrong. There were very little gray areas. There was a lot of work. I wouldn't call it work, but there were things that we did.
Like chores?
Chores, yeah, we did chores. You cleaned the garage, you mowed the grass. My dad, when he retired from the Army, was a relatively young man, and so he worked several different jobs, and that's one of the things I think that has impacted me is that he was never too proud to work. When he retired, his skill set really didn't transition well into the private sector. You know, they don't shoot down airplanes in the private sector, not on purpose, but. So he went to work. He delivered candy. He was a janitor, and he finally got into the post office. And so he was worked at the post office and retired from the post office. But I think the thing that it was instilled in us the most is that, you know, work was something that was fundamental, and you could take pride in your work no matter what it was, and that you worked, you provided for yourself, you were self-reliant. I had a variety of different, little jobs growing up, from mowing grass for neighbors and things of that nature, were things that were responsible, they had to get done. When I turned 19, I served a 2-year mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. That's my religious affiliation. And that was in and around the Navajo Indian Reservation in Arizona. So that 2 years was very formative, understanding people, understanding their circumstances, seeing a different part of the country that I was totally unfamiliar with. Even though we traveled a lot and we saw a lot of different things, I never thought that there was a place in the United States that would rival a third world country, and that would be most of the Indian reservations that are out west. Coming back, I worked a little bit in a refinery to save up money for school. I met my wife, my future wife. We were pen pals. Little interesting aside, my cousin, Patty Allen,
Yes.
Who was Patty Perillo at the time,
Yes.
had my wife in study hall. And Patty knew my beliefs, my religious affiliation, and she knew of my wife's, and she said, "Hey, if I send you a picture, maybe you two could write." She knew I was getting ready to go on this 2-year mission. So we were pen pals for over 2.5 years before we even met, and we did meet, and through our letters, we got to know each other, and we were married. We came back here. I graduated from the University of Akron with a degree in finance. I'm proud to say I'm a Zip. We raised our family here. We've lived here. I've lived here. This is the longest I've ever really lived in any one particular place. We have a lot of great experiences here in Wadsworth. I have a small financial planning practice. It's fee-based. I've been doing it for about 30 years. I have a very loyal client base. They're good people. They've been more or less turned into my friends, good friends. Get involved in a lot of different things in town. I've been in Rotary. I'm wearing my 34-year perfect attendance tab. I just achieved that.
Oh, you're such a good boy.
I know. You know, when I start something, I think that's another thing. When I start something, I usually finish it.
And this is a good time to finish.
Perfect.
Joe, fill us in on your background.
Well, I was born in Steubenville, Ohio, and my mother is Italian and from Italian background. Didn't learn to speak English until she started school, and so I come from an Italian background. But my father was from Appalachia, and my father is very interesting also in that he could not read or write, and the reason being that he never went to school because his parents got him a job when he was like 9 years old. It was more important for him to work on farms and more important for him to make money than it was to get an education. But he knew the value of education, and I mean this sincerely. He was probably one of the most intelligent men I've ever known in my life. He told me at a very young age, he said, "Look, no one's better than you, but you're not better than anybody else." He was not prejudiced in any means. I went to school in JU, Jefferson Union High School, which is no longer there in Steubenville, and graduated in 1968. I went to Kent, and I graduated from Kent in 1972. At Kent in 1970, my life kind of changed on May 4th because I lost a friend that day, Bill Schroeder, who was in ROTC, and so was I. He was coming out of class, and I was going into class, and he was shot and killed that day. And that changed me a lot because I realized that it could have easily been me, and other things too. And he was such a nice guy, easygoing and just a nice guy. I graduated, like I said, in 1972, tried to get a teaching job. My major was history, my minor was speech. Couldn't get a teaching job for a whole year, so I stayed in Steubenville and I subbed. And then I got a phone call the day I was leaving to go to Canada from a place called Wadsworth, wanting to know if I'd come in for a job interview. It was a week before school started in '73. I came in, I went to Toronto anyhow, but then I came down for the job interview. Got the job on I got the job on a Monday, the day of the interview. Found an apartment, started teaching a week later, and was here teaching for 35 years. And probably one of the best things ever happened to me. Great city, love it. Great school system, and great students. I coached the speech and debate team for a long time. I was very lucky. I worked with John All, who was probably considered to be one of the best speech coaches in the state of Ohio. He died at a young age, in his early 30s, and I took over as a speech coach.
Excuse me, his last name was?
All, John All, A-U-L.
A-U-L.
And then well, after that, well, what did I do after that? I didn't get married until late in life. I was working on my master's program at Akron U and in communications, and I met my wife, Wendy Terrell, and we got married a week before I turned 50. And I still teach at the University of Akron, and I'm a retired teacher here at Wadsworth, but I teach at the University of Akron. And my wife, for my 60th birthday, gave me tickets to the Indians Fantasy League.
Really?
So for a whole week, I played for the Cleveland Indians.
That sounds like great
Well,
fun.
I played with people like Joe Charbonneau, Rick Manning, and I made some friends. And because of that, I got a job working for the Indians for about 3 years. And now I work for the Rubber Ducks. I have 3 grandchildren, Alex, the oldest, and then there's Ava and Ella. And I have 2 stepsons from my wife. And it's really great. I mean, it was the easiest thing I ever did in my life was getting married. Anyhow, I enjoyed teaching here at Wadsworth. It meant a lot to me, and I enjoyed the students. And I've done a lot of programs for TV.
Okay. Patty, how about you? I think we know a lot about you already.
Yeah.
Everybody knows about Patty.
No. I was born in Barberton to a very conservative, very Catholic family. I was one of 5 children. Now, I say we're a conservative family, but my father and mother were both Democrats because everybody in Barberton was a Democrat. It was a very union town, hence the biggest celebration in the town to this day is Labor Day. And I remember as a child many politicians coming through town and appearing, but it was all Democrats that showed up for that. My father was very anti-union, as was most of his family and my mother's family, which was interesting because I went on after I began teaching to be quite active in the union. I had started teaching at Black River. I did 2 years there. I came to Wadsworth, actually the same year that Joe did, and started at the middle school, did 6 years there, and the rest of my 36 years.
What year was that? I forgot already.
73, yeah. Then started teaching at the high school and spent the rest of my 36 years at the high school. While I was teaching, I was very active and became very active in the union. I started off, I think, my first year in Wadsworth as a building rep, and then I went on to be treasurer for 6 years, and I was president for 15 years. I was on the negotiating team for 20 years. And the more I participated, the more I saw the need for unions and the value of unions. One of the activities that we did while being as part of the union was to go to various endorsement sessions where we would meet from various districts, would meet with all of the local politicians, state politicians would come in, and then they would answer a series of questions for us. This was really a long deal to see their stands on education, and I think this kind of set in cement my ideals as a Democrat, because I heard what the Republican candidates would say and what the Democratic candidates would say. And as an educator, I felt that as far as education was concerned, that the Democrats had more say for us. One of the big things was, I always heard was that teachers didn't deserve that much pay. It's an easy job. Joe's heard this. I know my first year I taught.
And you're off for 3 months a year.
Yeah, and you're off for 3 months a year. But my first salary, and this is a college graduate, was $4,800 for the year, which is not a whole lot, not really a livable job. And what I came to find out is that I felt that teachers deserved and demanded living wages that, you needed to attract the best and the brightest, I always felt, for education. And, I heard people say, well, you don't do it for the money, you do it because you love the kids. Well, yeah, it's true, you can love the kids, but you've also got to be able to support your family with that. And you can't do that if you don't have enough money. So I think that the unions play a big part of that. I did attend Akron U and was at Akron U at the same time that Joe was at Kent. Akron U was a rather conservative campus. I remember the SDS wanted to have a rally, anti-war rally the one time, and they were allowed to have it only if the opposite side could speak as well, and if the military side was presented. I too was affected by the Kent State situation, as a good friend that I graduated from high school with was one of the students that was injured. And
Joe,
was
what was his name?
Alan Kempfort.
Okay.
Yeah.
His father was president of a union in
He was a
Barberton.
very active union member, and he was also in city council in Barberton for a number of years. His sister, who also went on to be a teacher, I think she was in Hudson. I'm not sure if she stayed there till she retired, but she was also very active in that movement. I think all of those things, gathered my political interest, and when I retired, I became I wanted to do something different, and I decided to go into politics, but on a local level, because I think that's where you can make the most difference and work for your own community. You know, a couple of people talked about community service, and I'm big on community service, and I'm extremely active with Kiwanis, with my church, and I lecture, and I distribute Holy Communion at nursing homes, and prepare funeral meals, and I donate blood religiously, and all of these things. But I got that from my dad, because my dad, although stern, was...
Okay, in a few minutes you can explain how you donate blood religiously.
You make the sign of the cross before you donate. That's quite easy.
Ron, I know some of your background, but you can tell everybody else.
Well, I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania near the city of Altoona. And I was about 6 or so when the Second World War started, and my father and several of my uncles and my grandparents all worked for the Pennsylvania Railroad. And since this was a critical industry, none needed to go to the military. They worked for the railroad. Union members, all Democrats, didn't know any Republicans as far as I know when I was growing up. I didn't think much about politics all the way through my high school years. I was following the usual teenage angst in my high school years, and then college and graduate school, and I didn't really have time for that. Studying chemistry is pretty much full-time occupation. I didn't really think much about politics, but I'd been a Democrat when I grew up, and so when a election came about, I just didn't think about it. I just voted Democrat. Now this began to change. I graduated, was married, starting a family, moved out here to Wadsworth for my first job with PPG Industries. And about the mid-'60s, as Vietnam began to heat up and the civil rights movement was gaining full steam, it's more of a topic of carpool conversation and coffee break conversation that began to affect me quite a bit. And then the tragedy at Kent State happened just across the street. That affected me very deeply. My youngest son was 10 days old at that time. I thought, what kind of a world are my children, my 3 boys, going to grow up here? Coincidentally, at the same time I was looking for a new church home. I had converted from Roman Catholicism some years before, with Protestant, Presbyterian. Came to town, tried to help start a young Presbyterian congregation, and that didn't work out after a couple of years. And so I discovered the Mennonite Church. At least I got reacquainted with it, and their stance in anti-war and peace efforts was very appealing to me, and I began getting involved in that. So I think that I'm not a pious individual particularly. I'm much more of Thomas Jefferson than Billy Graham, for example, but I don't go about quoting scripture. But I think that my Judeo-Christian ethical system, coupled with my scientific view of the world, really underlays my political stances. Feed the hungry. Therefore, I'm in favor of things like food stamp programs. Welcome the stranger. Very concerned about the immigration system. Scientifically, to be stewards of the planet. Therefore, things like the Clean Air and Clean Water Act and EPA are very important to me, and despair that the present administration is emasculating and even trying to completely eliminate these kinds of programs. So, and scientifically, stewards of the planet, global warming, I'm scientifically convinced that whatever may have happened in eons past, the present quantity of carbon dioxide and methane in the atmosphere are due to human intervention, human actions. It is causing really the major cause of a present global warming. And so when I see politicians and so forth being involved in denying that, I need to fight against that. So this has led me to, in thinking about this, spending some time also on the East Coast in a more liberal environment than Ohio, realizing in my mind that part of it is, though we must each individually take action here and do our part to contribute in actions and financially, if we're able, to these kinds of causes. I believe that there is as I've stated here before, there's a case for the government, for all of us together, actually to help in these kinds of efforts, particularly in the social world, social activities world. So.
Okay, very good. We've got a few minutes left, so I'm going to fill you in on my background, most of which you probably already know. I was born and raised in Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio. I was the third of 6 children. Educated at St. Joseph's Grade School and graduated from Cuyahoga Falls High School in the class of '57. After a brief stint of active duty in the U.S. Army, I attended a technical school, became a registered X-ray technician in 1960. I married the lovely Brenda Holler in 1962 and moved to Wadsworth in 1963 to take a job as a production foreman at the Ohio Match Company. We have 3 children, Philip, Adam, and Jennifer, all of whom graduated from Wadsworth High. After 1 year at the Match, as we call it here in Wadsworth, or used to anyway.
Still do.
Did you ever call it the Match?
Yeah.
Oh,
always.
okay.
My grandmother worked there.
Did she really?
Yes, and it was during World War I. She worked there, and she, to the day she died, called it the Match.
Yeah. Well, I did too after a while. Anyway, after 1 year at the Match Company, the Match ran into serious legal problems. Restraint of trade, they were giving away the matches. If you bought a case of Hunt Foods ketchup, you got a case of Ohio matches. And I think it was the Lion Match Company in Detroit that sued the Match, or sued Hunt Foods. Anyway, and after 1 year at the Match, I joined General Tire in Akron. And in 10 years at General Tire, I worked a number of positions, including a QC inspector, engineering aide, department manager, and human resources. And also, while at General Tire, I attended the University of Akron part-time, graduating in '72 with a BS/BA majoring in finance. Thought you might be interested in knowing that. In 1974, I joined a recruiting firm that eventually became known as Munster, Grom, Austin, and Lance. In 1981, I struck out on my own, starting C. John Grom Executive Search. After 2 years, I was hired by a client, Rubbermaid Incorporated, as a member of the corporate staff responsible for recruiting executives into the company at a time of rapid growth. During my 10 years at Rubbermaid, I brought 100 executives into the company while the company quadrupled in size. It joined the ranks of Fortune 500 companies and was selected as the most admired company in America for 3 consecutive years. We did a good job there for a while. I left Rubbermaid to restart C. John Grom Executive Search, recruiting executive talent for a variety of consumer product companies coast to coast. I sort of slid into retirement the first 10 years of the new century. It was sort of triggered by the 9/11, which disrupted a lot of things, including my business. In 2012, I founded Right and Left Incorporated as a way to promote political civility at all levels of political life. Our Right and Left Discussion Forum is one attempt to contribute to that goal. My political life included 2 runs at the Wadsworth City Council from the 4th Ward and working on the campaigns of other candidates in Wadsworth and the U.S. Congress.
I have a question for did you save all those letters?
I do have them.
That's wonderful.
I do,
Those,
yeah.
those are something, and save them for your kids.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I have them. Yeah.
Okay, I have a question for you.
Okay.
When your dad retired, where did he retire to?
New Jersey.
New Jersey.
Yeah.
How did
yeah.
you get from New Jersey to?
I think it was far enough, it was close enough to Ohio, but far enough that no one would just pop in. So maybe that's, he would say that all the time.
Oh, so you relocated, your folks stayed in New Jersey?
Yeah, my dad stayed there. He had military benefits, and the Philadelphia Naval Yard was just right across the river, and so the hospital was there and all the other benefits that he had worked for. So
Okay, where did you meet Robin?
I met her, my cousin Patty
Patty,
introduced
yeah.
us. She sent a picture of her, and shortly thereafter I left for my
Your
mission.
cousin Patty, who?
Patty Allen.
It was
She was Patty Perillo then.
She taught French at the high
Yeah,
school.
yeah, yeah,
So.
yeah. So
Yeah.
that's how
It's a
we.
cool story.
That's how we met.
Yeah, no, she said, and she told me, she said, you know, I saw this girl in class and I just thought she'd be perfect for Bryan. And it
She's.
worked out really well.
It did. It did. We were pen pals. I guess people don't do that anymore, but we wrote
Yeah.
letters. So.
Anybody got questions for anybody else?
I have a comment. You brought up Roseanne from Kent, the girl.
Oh.
What was her?
Can't for
Can't
You
for
know
it.
what? I've never called her Roseanne in my life. She went by her name Chicky.
Right. Well, I met.
I
let me
know
tell you
that
where I
was her
met
name.
It's strange. I met her on a day of May 4th. I was in my history class. She came running down into the auditorium at Bowman Hall, yelling and screaming that her brothers and sisters are being shot out there and we should do something. And the professor said, well, we got a few minutes left in class. If you want to leave now, you can, but I'd rather you not go. So I stayed, and I left with him, and I was tear gassed by helicopter that day, going back to my dorm. But anyhow, the next time I saw her was at Wadsworth High School. She was a student teacher.
She's
here
student taught there,
with
right.
John All.
Yeah,
on the
years ago.
on the speech team.
Got time for one more comment. When I took entrance exams to get into Akron U, it was recommended that I become a teacher. And I said, I have no interest in being a teacher. And this counselor said, but Mr. Grom, Akron teachers are now making $5,400 a year.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm making more than that, except inspecting tires. So
My father made more than I did, working as a laborer in a steel mill
Right.
than I did as a teacher.
Well, thank you very much. I hope it was interesting to our viewers.
Yes.